There we go. And then hit share. Okay, did it share? Yep, okay, shared. Good, good. Turn off the music and there we are. Hello, everybody. This is Frank here for the new episode of the Frank Ireland Show. Today's guest is someone I've been following, I think, since like 2015 on Twitter. And I've been wanting to talk to him for years. And I'm really excited about this. And I remember a couple of years ago, he's like, yeah, man, we got to talk about movies and stuff. I'm like, okay. And then, you know, when I started my new show, I was like, oh, it's finally a chance. I gotta invite him on. So here he is, the one, the only Pinnland Empire.
Hello, what's going on?
Hello. It's honestly an honor to talk to you like for the first time ever.
Oh,
and
come on.
No, it is because when
I think I asked to be on myself before you when you had suggested a side-by-side. I didn't see it right away, and then like you went ahead and did it, and I didn't know, but then I made it. And I was like, oh, hey, I didn't want you to think I was like stealing your idea.
No.
And then I was like, I'll come on your, man, because I know that you have, I tune in occasionally. So I've known about your streaming and your work and whatnot. So no, the honor's all on this side, man.
Dude, because like your work is amazing because you see things and I'm like, that's like the first time I've ever like seen somebody else like me where it's like, dude, you watch movies and you see like the connections and all that. It's almost like all like the math and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah. Because that's what he's talking about. What Marcus is talking about. It's Marcus, right?
Marcus Pinn or Pinnland Empire, but you can just call me Marcus.
Marcus. Yeah. So the side by side I suggested to Marcus was because it was during Halloween season and I was rewatching all the Halloween movies, like Universal monster movies and all that. And then I went to see Halloween Kills, and it was like almost shot for shot.
No, it was.
From Bride of Frankenstein, and I was like, oh my god, you got to do the side by side. And I know you're busy because you probably got a set schedule and things you have to do. So by the time you saw it, you're like, oh man.
Yeah, no. At this point, I guess I'm somewhat busy between side little music obligations, my own website, outside film writing, constantly making comparisons, and being a husband and father too. I guess. Not in that order, because that sounds bad the way I just listened.
The husband and father is last. Okay. So tell the audience about yourself for those who might not know who you are.
Sure. My name is Marcus Pinn. I run the film blog Pinnland Empire. I've been doing it for 13 years. Wow. I'm on Twitter at Pinnland_Empire. I also have another Twitter account at Hokuto Empire, which is me. And another guy, this guy Kamel Wu, and we do like action side by sides. But yeah, just a film blogger, writer. These last few years, though, it's been way more just visual comparisons with an occasional sentence or a few paragraphs. I don't write in long form as much, but if you'd like to check out more of my long form writing, my kind of second home is the Pink Smoke. It's a film platform, site, podcast, everything run by two of my closest friends that I've known well before Twitter even existed, John Cribbs and Chris Funderburg. So that's where I get a lot of my like 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 word pieces out on a Pink Smoke. So, but yeah, like I said, PinnlandEmpire.com. There's 13 years worth of writing and rants and reviews and all kinds of stuff on there. So,
yeah, because your stuff is just amazing. Because I always tell people like when I watch movies, it's like I see all the connections. Sometimes it takes me out, but sometimes like I love seeing the connections. Like what do you call it? For example, I'm okay with like something like Licorice Pizza where they homage like American Graffiti, but when I watch Batman, they go overboard. Like, oh no, this is too much Levin. Like this is too much like Christine. There's like too many. Like it's too much.
Sure.
It's like,
sure.
Yeah, they over dip their toe into the homage. It's where it's like, oh, it's too much. Where the other one's like, yeah, I like that. It's like a little.
That last Batman movie, I think it referenced every single previous Batman movie shot wise. Yeah, that was an interesting one. That speaking of Batman, that was another movie comparison that like got stolen immediately.
Yeah,
I compared it to Seven, the Batman in Seven, and I posted it. It got a lot of attention, and then like within an hour or two, like so many other bigger platforms just picked it up, and just kind of ran with it. Because I don't really watermark
Yeah.
I feel like it takes away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I don't know. I feel like 2/3 of the stuff that I compare is something that nobody would steal, like would think of stealing, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
like, because I'm big into Chantal Ackerman or Todd Haynes or
Mm-hmm.
Bresson, you know, people like that. But when it gets to the like Stanley Kubrick, Christopher Nolan, Tarantino, like the kind of semi-obvious stuff, it's I don't get as worked up when people kind of just steal my gifts. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So
What got you into doing the side by side? Or I should say, before even that, what got you into the movies? You know,
I guess, you know, it was my dad.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was like a repeat watcher. Like
Mm-hmm.
I look thinking about since I was a kid, my dad would just kind of have like the one VHS tape, the 1 6-hour VHS tape with like the 3 movies on it.
Yes.
And he would just leave that in the VCR for about like a week or two. So, and you know, it would be like on one VHS tape, it would be like Rocky 2, The Great Santini, and like I don't know, European Vacation. Like it would just be the most random, or like
Whoa.
one tape or another tape would be like Life Force, Claudine, and like Terminator. You know what I mean? Just whatever he was on cable, or he used to go to a video store. My dad was like the king of the dual VHS. He would just copy stuff. So my dad's VHS tape was pretty big, and he would just kind of have the movies that he would just kind of watch on repeat until he switched it up like every 2 weeks or so. So, and then when I would just watch movies along with my dad, and that's probably where it came. Just like, oh, so in 2 weeks I watched the same movie maybe 2 or 3 times, so it's just kind of stuck in my head. So that's kind of the start of it.
Yeah.
And then what was it? It's funny because this is a filmmaker I don't always have the nicest things to say about him.
Mm-hmm.
But if you remember back in like the early 2000s, those Quentin Tarantino special edition DVDs came out.
Mm-hmm.
It was like pop-up video. So like, look, we get it. Like with Tarantino, there's a lot of obvious stuff, whether it's like French New Wave, even though he kind of downplays his knowledge of French New Wave, or just like Sergio Leone or people like that. But there's also some deeper cut comparisons and references and homages that Tarantino does. So it was Kill Bill wasn't even out. So it was Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown. And if there's like a feature, if you can watch the movie along, and then stuff would pop up. It'd be like, this, you know, is a reference to a movie that Robert Forster was in back in 1970 something. And I thought like, oh, that was really cool. And that's kind of how I learned stuff. And I say this preamble because, again, it's like I don't have the greatest things to say about late period Tarantino, but I can't deny that his movies were really what got me kind of tunnel vision into like, oh, this came from this, this came from that, and not even the super obvious stuff.
Right.
And then a year before I started my blog, I went to go see Paul Schrader speak at the Lincoln Center, and they were handing out an old film comment that he had written a piece in about the film canon. But in that film comment issue, there was a review of Marie Antoinette. It's actually on the cover. It's from 2006. It's Kirsten Dunst. She's on the cover. And in that issue of film comment, they're comparing interior shots from Marie Antoinette to kind of old French architecture. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, that's really cool. And then when I started my blog in 2010, I wrote about Safe, which is one of my favorite movies ever. I think that's a perfect movie, Todd Haynes' Safe. And I remember just reading about how he loved Stanley Kubrick. So I started comparing some interior shots from Safe with some of the interior shots, the old guy that they go and terrorize, and then they revisit later on in the movie, like the interiors of his house. And that's kind of how it started. So it's those things. I'm also a DJ. That was a big part of my life, scratching and mixing. So subconsciously too, when you blending song to song and, you know, matching BPMs, I think subconsciously that also plays a big part into comparing stuff.
Yeah.
So,
that's wild, dude.
Yeah.
Because I had a similar thing. Like my mom was the movie person.
Okay.
She did the dual VHS.
Yeah.
We had the 3 movies where it was like,
awesome.
What about Bob, Terminator 2, and then Rambo 3, where it's like
that sounds exactly like one of my dad's. And it's funny because my mother didn't dislike movies, but my mother was very much like, I saw a movie, I saw it once, I don't need to see it again. She used to say that. It's funny. My parents loved each other very much. May they both rest in peace. But they had a lot of things not in common. Yeah. And it used to drive my mom crazy because I remember I could hear her from my room they were in their room and my mother would be like, didn't you just watch this? Like for as long as I can remember. And that was my dad. He would watch things on repeat and he wouldn't watch it again for a long time because it's like, well, I watched it 3 or 4 times within 2 weeks, so I don't need to see it again for a long time. So
right.
yeah.
But that's wild because I almost like when you were saying that, I was like, that's like verbatim. And I had a similar thing growing up with like movies. Funny example, but when I was growing up, I was watching a movie called Dustin Checks In.
Oh yeah, of course.
Children's movie, Jason Alexander and all that.
Yeah.
Pee Wee Herman's in it.
Yeah.
And I remember in the movie they're watching Planet of the Apes, and I'm like, "What's that movie?"
Right.
And then
right.
I told my parents, I'm like, I want to watch that movie. And they're like, are you sure? Because I think it just came out, like their anniversary. So it was like expensive at the time. Like it just came out. So I'm like, I want to watch it. They're like, all right, we'll get you it. And then I watched Planet of the Apes. And after that, I watched all the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's totally where you see one movie and then you want to see like, okay, what's that reference? What are they referencing? And then you watch those. And then I would watch The Simpsons and then see like, oh, there's references from these movies on The Simpsons
too.
It's just ridiculous. Like,
it's funny too. The more we talk about video stores, so another funny fact about, so I was born in Queens, but we moved when I was a kid. I grew up most of my life in Amherst, Massachusetts. It's in Western Massachusetts. It's the part of Massachusetts nobody thinks about. It's nowhere near Boston. We don't have accents. But I grew up, my house, literally up the street, same side of the street, there was a small movie theater. Down the street was a video store. So that's another thing too. So I lived sandwiched between a movie theater and a video store. But
that's awesome.
When I was in the 11th grade, I used to rent Gummo all the time, and they only had one copy of it. And then finally, I would go in, I would re-rent it. And then finally one day, this guy was like, hey man, other people want to rent this movie. We only have one copy. You can't keep renting this. But he was like, but, the guy who directed this movie, this guy, Harmony Korine, he really likes Werner Herzog. Do you know who that is? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, he made this movie called Even Dwarfs Started Small. And then I watched it, and I remember it's like, yeah, Even Dwarfs Started Small. It's not shot for shot exact, but it's kind of like, okay, it makes sense that the guy that made Gummo would like this movie. And then I came back and I was like, are there any other Werner Herzog movies you have? And he was like, yeah, of course. We got a whole section. This video store was called Video to Go. And except for the new releases, the rest of the video store was organized by country. And then within each country, it was organized by director.
Oh, wow.
So I rented Fitzcarraldo. And I came home and my dad was like, are you watching Fitzcarraldo? And I was like, oh, you know this movie? He's like, yeah, I have it. And then that was another kind of jump off point. So yeah, so that's another one too. I wish I remembered his name. I remember exactly what he looks like, but it was a video clerk at Video to Go that was like, oh, you like this newer movie? Well, he got a lot of his stuff from this older movie. And that's kind of how that started also. So
that's cool. That is so cool. Yeah, like I'm sort of on like the simpler side. Like I didn't get into like big name like directors like that until I got into like film school. But like before then, go ahead.
Sure, no. Well, in fairness, I wasn't renting Gummo for like the prestige of it. Everyone just kept talking about this weird messed up movie called like I watched it because everybody in my high school was just saying how weird it it was. So that's the reason I rented it.
Yeah.
And then so the whole Werner Herzog thing was just happenstance. And it's funny because you're not a lot of people, he's addressed this himself, but like Werner Herzog, a lot of times in so many words, he kind of cringes when he's associated with like art house cinema. Like he said a couple of times, it's like he doesn't like that term, or like the new German cinema. Just, I mean, from a historical basis, he was making movies before that movement started. He's kind of the elder statesman of it. So, he's another one. Like Werner Herzog is a guy that doesn't see himself as like art house, even though he is. But, a lot of filmmakers are evasive. They don't like labels. And I think Werner Herzog's a perfect example of.
Yeah, he doesn't like labels. Totally.
I mean, hey, as an actor, his filmography as an actor is all over the place. Jack Reacher, he's on one of the recent Star Wars shows, and he eventually would show up in Harmony Korine films. So he's all over the place as an actor. He has a cameo in what's that Robin Williams movie? What Dreams May Come. Yeah. So, but anyway, just going off on a little rant there.
Oh, that's totally fine. Because like just actually getting to talk to you about like, movies and stuff, that's so wild. Because like for the longest time when I was growing up, I was like I was the movie guy, and nobody else would like know what I'm talking about. And I had a similar situation where I was in school where like because like where I live, they don't really show re-releases, but like for 1 week they showed like The Godfather, Back to the Future, Ghostbusters and some other movies. It's maybe Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. It was like
Sure.
all like heavy hitters during one week. And I remember I was talking about it in school, and someone said like, why would you want to see that on the big screen? You could rent it from the library. And it just like blew my mind. Like,
Yeah.
I want to see Ghostbusters on the big screen. Why would I want to
Sure.
watch the
No,
pan and
exactly.
scan?
Yeah.
It's just wild. It's just
Yeah.
wild.
Where did you grow up? Where are you from?
Western New York. I don't want to get too
Oh, okay.
specific because I've had some people like try to track me down. So that's why.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, because I do a mashups on my other channel, and I did a review with my sister, and we were outside
Uh-huh.
like, oh yeah, we just saw Sicario 2. It did like a little fun review, and then one of my subscribers like, I know that theater, blah blah blah, and gave like the exact address and like location. I was like, no,
Whoa.
no, yeah,
Okay. Never
yeah.
mind.
So that's why I'm like, no, because
Right.
I have some fans like that. Because I started to do like mashups like 10, 13 years ago, and so like it has like a weird audience.
Yeah.
So I try to be careful of where I say I'm from. So that's why.
Fair
That's
enough. Fair enough.
Fair enough,
I guess
fair
I
enough.
should. I go to the movies. Well, not a lot these days. I have a young son, but I go to the movies, and fairly regularly someone will come up and they'll like recognize my voice from a podcast, or they're like, "Are you Marcus? Are you Pinnland Empire?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay. What's up?" You know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I had one fan encounter, and that was luckily okay. But other than the comment on
cool.
the thing, I was like,
Yeah. Wow, that's messed up.
yeah,
But,
yeah, yes. Oh, I was just going to say something. You just mentioned something similar. Oh dear. Oh, dang it.
what did I say? I said movie theaters,
Movie
library.
theaters, libraries. Yes, library. Okay, so when you were growing up, you had the video store. Like,
Yes.
do you remember like what was like the first couple you got? Like the big giant pile? Because I remember that when I was in high school, I'd go to the library and get like a stack. I think it had like Apocalypse Now,
Right. Well,
Groundhog
that's
Day, things like that.
Well, there's almost like two answers to that, because like the first 7 years of my life, I did grow up in Queens, New York, so I remember all the VHS box covers from there. But then when I started going to the video store myself, when we moved to Massachusetts, there was that stuff too. I remember when I was a kid, like 5, 6, 7, I used to always be fascinated with the Repo Man cover.
Oh yeah.
It's just like it always caught my eye. And I used to ask my mom, I was like, hey, can we rent this? And she would look at it. She's like, no. But not realizing, my mom didn't even realize at that point that all the stuff I watched with my, like First Blood, Taxi Driver, like my dad didn't really care too much. If a movie was on, I would just sit in the room with him. But so she had no idea that I already seen way worse movies than that.
Yeah.
And then finally one day she just like broke down. She was like, I guess. And it actually, Repo Man, I think it is rated R just for language, but other than
pretty
that,
tame.
it wasn't as bad.
Yeah, it's pretty
tame.
tame.
When we moved to Amherst, I could just walk to the video store down the hill. I remember the renting. It's such a weird. I was like, maybe I was 10, 11, because it's an R-rated movie. Also, the Richard Linklater's Slacker. But it's like, yeah, it's R, but it's like, what is it even R for? I could be wrong, but I remember seeing the cover. One, I thought it was a guy. Forever, there's the cover of Slacker. It's actually Teresa Nervosa from the original drummer from the Butthole Surfers. She has like one of the most famous scenes in Slacker. And I remember the term slacker because the principal from Back to the Future used to say that to Marty McFly. You're a slacker. You're a slacker. And I remember thinking, oh, I know that word from Back to the Future from when I was a little kid. And I just rented it thinking the whole movie was going to be about that character on the cover, when in reality, Slacker, it's like 100 different little quick stories all in the same day. So yeah, but again, I swear, I wasn't into like prestige movies when I was a kid. It was all about like feeling like, oh, this box cover. And I only say that because it's like my earliest video store memories were renting like an Alex Cox movie or a Richard Linklater. I don't think the average little kid would rent that. It's not like I knew what I was renting. It just you would just go to a video store and it's like, oh, this cover looks cool. You know what I mean? And you would just rent it. It's similar to music. Like I would buy a lot of like albums and it's like, I don't even know what this is, but the cover art looks cool. And this is back when like a CD or a tape, this is before digital, obviously. So I would just buy something sometimes just strictly based off the cover. So
yeah, I remember those. Like back then, like they had some cool posters. Like the one that really stands out to me, like video store poster, was the movie Trespass, where it has like all the actors in those boxes. And then it has like the pile of gold, and then it said like what would you do or something like that if you had $1 million. And I always wanted to see. I didn't see it until like years later, but like that poster is ingrained in me, like movie poster, like on the wall.
It's so funny you say, because that's a movie I didn't see the movie. I got the soundtrack first. I think I was like 11 when that movie came out. And I remember because it was like a hip hop. That was back when hip hop soundtracks was such a thing. That early 90s, mid 90s period of Trespass and Boys in the Hood, Judgment Night, all that stuff.
Judgment
And then
Night,
I think,
dude.
yeah. Well, Judgment Night is a big deal for me because I'm from Amherst, Massachusetts, and Dinosaur Jr. That's where Jade Maskus is from. So it's a small town. So anytime somebody famous from Amherst does something, it's always like a big deal. So shout out to my boy Eben Moss, Backrat. He's on The Bear. He was in Girls. He does a lot of great stuff. But when you're a small town and there's not that many famous people, it's like it's a big deal. So
definitely. But that's so cool though. And let's see, I was also wondering, I remember now what I was going to ask you. It was about podcasts, because I was going to do some research on you, but then like the first 5 minutes I'm like, no, I gotta hear this guy out. Because you were talking about like because I was just going on YouTube and it was the movie Blue Collar, I think. And I was like, oh, I don't want to hear more. I got to talk to you in person about your movies.
Sure.
So like, I know, because I have the little dinosaur here. People are probably wondering why I have the dinosaur here.
Was that
I want to know.
Herman reference?
Oh no, it's it's supposed to be Clifford.
Stefan.
Stefan, yes.
Stefan the dinosaur.
Yes. Oh. So I wanted to know, because like you're a big proponent for the movie Clifford, and I'm not sure.
I am. Yeah.
So tell us, like, what got you into Clifford? Like, how did you discover it, and what started all that?
So I guess it's just my sense of humor as a kid has not changed much, as an adult. There was this period from like the late 80s through the early-ish 90s where there were just a lot of wacky comedies that I still love to this day. It's just the tone, the vibe, whatever. It's like Freaked, Young Einstein. What was the other movie Yahoo Serious did about the Kelly gang? It was something Kelly, but Meet the Applegates, Heathers, all these movies I watched when I was a kid. That's just a big part of my sense of humor. And I used to watch Second City TV reruns on Nick at Night.
Yeah.
And Martin Short, obviously, he's a Second City alum. He's also Saturday Night Live alum. He was always funny to me.
Yeah.
And then I remember when the trailer to that movie came out, it was like, wait, this grown man, he's playing a little kid? That's hilarious. And not much has changed since. I'm 41 years old. That movie is still funny to me. Like, in an unironic way. Like, that's something you'll know. Like, if you go to Pinnland Empire or even on Twitter, occasionally I'll do a little rant about liking things ironically. That really kind of, it was a thing back in the day. Like a guilty pleasure was kind of a thing. That didn't bother me. But in these last like 15 years or so, it's kind of like, do you actually like it, or are you just ashamed that you like it? So you have to kind of be like, oh, this is just a dumb movie. But it's okay to like you're an adult, just like what you like. And outside of being a Martin Short fan, just that dynamic, again, of like a grown man playing a kid is hilarious. And I think that Charles Grodin also is a great straight man. In that movie, the term straight man. But then by the end of the movie, he's kind of the comic relief because he's slowly being driven insane.
Yes.
Actually, kind of early on, he's actually kind of being driven insane. But by the very end, he's literally trying to murder.
Yeah, the roles have reversed.
He's trying to murder, like all jokes aside, literally trying to murder his nephew. And yeah, I also, I'm a big fan. I'm close to my uncles. So I'm a big fan of uncle nephew movies.
Oh, okay.
And that relationship explored on film. Like my son, my firstborn, I named him after one of my uncles. So
nice.
Yeah. Wow, so all of that goes into my love of Clifford. I just like that style of comedy. Where it's like doesn't take itself too seriously.
During this rewatch, because I watched it to prepare for this interview, because I don't know if we're going to deep dive or not, but I watched it and there was a comparison. I was like, oh geez, I never noticed that before. So I'm wondering if the creators of A Bug's Life are fans of Clifford, because there's a scene almost verbatim where Richard Kind is like, do you understand me? Do you understand me? And then in the movie Bug's Life, Kevin Spacey says that to the Richard Kind character. Do you understand me? Do you understand me? And it's almost verbatim and like the same kind of acting, because they Richard Kind.
Well, it's Richard Kind, and that's when my brain starts working, because it's I'm a lot of times you never know. Like to get I've been on other podcasts where we talk about movie comparisons, and I always say it's like I'm simply just presenting two things that I think look similar. It's not a deeper meaning. Sometimes people apply their own assumed deeper meaning and then get annoyed, but it's like I never said that this person definitely saw this and blah blah
Mhm.
blah. But but those kind of connections are interesting. Also, Clifford is one of those movies where it's like Nicolas Cage is a big fan of it, as
Mhm.
is David Lynch. It's one of
Mhm.
those things where a lot of people have pulled. If you read Martin Short's biography, I must say he
Mhm.
talks about it a lot. How in his life, the most random people, pull him aside and just like, listen, I love Clifford, and you got to understand this is Martin Short, who he's done. We're talking about Three Amigos and Second
Mhm.
City TV, all that stuff, and the fact that
Yeah.
people were, Elizabeth Taylor. Uh, Contacted him to tell him how much he loved Clifford. Nicolas
Yeah.
Cage saw him.
Yeah.
They were on the same flight once, and he got up from his seat to walk over to Martin Short and tell him how much he loved Clifford. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it wouldn't surprise me. And the fact that the same actor that you mentioned is involved in both of those scenes, it's like, I
Yeah.
don't know. You
It's
never know.
gotta be. It's gotta
Yeah,
be.
yeah, it could be. Yeah,
Or even like subconsciously, whoever did that scene.
exactly.
Yeah.
Subconscious is huge, and that's a
Mhm.
big. Nowadays on both of my accounts, I'm big into I've dug up some old books or interviews or old commentary tracks where I get
Mhm.
quotes from a filmmaker saying like, "Hey, this scene influenced this scene," or "This director influenced this director," where it's kind of like just kind of strengthening my comparison a little bit. But
Mhm.
outside of that, it's just again, the subconscious is huge, and I think it's fun to find similarities between
Mhm.
some anime film and a Stanley Kubrick movie, or Clifford
Mhm.
and a David Lynch movie, which is a comparison I've made. So
Yeah.
I'm I think people assume sometimes that I'm trying to make a direct statement, or it's
Mhm.
not necessarily. It's just, hey, these two scenes are similar. I think it's cool.
Yeah.
It's a through line through cinema. It's like you never know. That's
Yeah.
you know.
Because I feel like there's like things that inspire you. Maybe it could be like a silly thing, or maybe it's like that one shot that you like
Sure.
repeat.
Yeah.
Because I even like in film school, I remember like there was like one shot I wanted to repeat, and it was just like it was like two kids fighting in the schoolyard. But like the one shot I repeated was like the T-Rex foot in the mud when like
Uh
Dr.
huh.
Grant's holding the kid. But it was like almost shot for
Ah,
shot. But it's like
wow.
little things like that will influence you or
Yeah.
any director. Like I know freaking. That's when I like listening to Paul Thomas Anderson interviews because he's very forward about saying who he's riffing off of or who's
Here's
inspiring
another
him.
one. In college, I had the Boogie Nights and Sydney
Mhm.
DVDs, or Heart Eight, whatever you want to call it. And
Yeah.
those two movies specifically, he talked so much about Jonathan Demme and
Mhm.
Robert Altman, but not even just the director. Like, I mean, for those of you who go back to the DVD era, Paul
Mhm.
Thomas Anderson was talking about the opening scene of Sydney and how he just ripped it from the beginning of oh my gosh, what's the Jonathan Demme, the Mary Steenburgen movie where it's in Vegas. Oh man, hold on, because now I'm
Oh, what is
hold
it?
on
Because Jonathan
with
Demme's
Jason
a
Robards. Oh my gosh, I'm driving myself crazy.
yeah, it's a blind spot for me because I'm trying to get into Jonathan Demme because like the only big one I really know is Silence of the Lambs, and I love that movie. Like
Oh,
this
Melvin and Howard. My goodness,
Melvin and Howard. Oh my
that's
god.
yeah, that's one of Paul Thomas Anderson's favorite films, and he just said straight up, I just wanted to rip off the opening scene from Melvin and Howard, and if you know both movies, now it kind of makes sense. And
Hmm.
the Robert Altman thing, he's very open about that too, and
Hmm.
just in general, he's kind of his generation. He's one of those movie
Hmm.
brats. It's like
Yes.
going back to Tarantino for a second. He's so synonymous with homage and
Hmm.
copying and all that stuff, but
Hmm.
his peers, either a few years before or a few years after him, like a Jim Jarmusch. Jim Jarmusch is another guy super open about all the
Hmm.
people he steals from. It
Hmm.
uses that word steal. Hal
Hmm.
Hartley. Hal Hartley's another guy who he's not as like, hey, I wanted to cut, but it's like when you read a book or you read an interview, it's like, okay, yeah, he loves Bresson, he loves Godard.
Hmm.
I think unfortunately Hal Hartley's a guy who gets too boxed in and always compared to Godard when Hartley's love of film is so vast.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, Paul Thomas Anderson is another one, just like Tarantino. I guess maybe he doesn't wear it on his sleeve as well as Tarantino, but
Hmm.
it's all there. Every movie
Hmm.
is a collage, you know.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's a good word for it, collage.
Yeah, collage
Because
artist.
yeah, because you watch it and it's just like it's almost like everything he loves. Like every movie he makes is like a collage of different things that he loves of
Yeah,
that because
and
he has
it's
hard
like
research on it.
I compare it to like if I like take Jonathan Demme. If Jonathan Demme is a bass player, and I don't know, Robert Altman's a drummer.
Mhm.
Guys like Tarantino or even Paul Thomas Anderson, they're very talented DJs. And I'm
Yes.
a DJ, so I'm not even
Mhm.
so that's not even belittling. To DJ in any form and be great at it is an
Mhm.
art in itself. And I'm not trying to
Yes.
belittle what they do because I like some Paul Thomas Anderson movies. I like some Tarantino movies.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, because that makes sense though, because they're taking different tracks, they're taking different beats, and they're
Right.
making their own thing, and that's so cool.
And that's an important thing too. I guess I failed to say that you said it. Still doing their own thing, as weird
Yes.
as it sounds, because
Mhm.
even the plots to some of their movies are taken from another movie, but
Yeah.
it's still their own thing. If that makes
Yeah.
any sense,
Yeah.
remixing almost like an
Right.
original remix, which is almost an oxymoron, but
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, because like fans of like Christopher Nolan. That always kind of bothers me because they're like, "Oh, Christopher Nolan." I'm like, "Well, there's other directors." Because I know like people on Twitter usually do that. They overhype Nolan, and I feel like,
well, it's
because
funny you say that too, because he's another director where it's not like every day. That it used to feel like every day I would get into a back and forth with someone, but Christopher Nolan's another one who, if you read enough, he's a director who I don't really have much of an opinion on, but I've
yeah,
seen all of his movies.
hmm
He's that kind of guy. Like I want to see
hmm
his new movie so I can have an opinion on it, but I
yeah,
don't rush to see it.
yeah,
But besides that, he's another guy who, like, before I watched this movie, like when Interstellar had
hmm
come out, he was doing his press tour. He talked a lot about how he was watching Tarkovsky films before it came out,
hmm
before he made Interstellar, and specifically The Mirror.
hmm
And then he's a fan of Terrence Malick. Also, like, if you see Dunkirk, and then if
hmm
you know Malick's Thin Red Line, then it kind of makes sense. But then
hmm
sometimes I've done a comparison without using a quote,
hmm
comparing a Christopher Nolan film to Tarkovsky or Christopher Nolan to Malick. And then for as many people that hype Christopher Nolan up, there are a lot of people that like hate him.
hmm
So they'll be like, oh, yeah, right. I doubt Christopher Nolan has ever seen a Tarkovsky movie. And it's kind of like, Tarkovsky's not this deep cut. I mean, Tarkovsky is my favorite filmmakers, but
yeah,
he's not synonymous with like
yeah,
prestige or uppityness, whatever term you want to use. And then
yeah,
I just do a little screenshot of an interview blurb, and it's like, see right there, Christopher Nolan just said he loves Tarkovsky's The Mirror. It inspired Interstellar. Or see right here,
yeah,
this is a literal Q&A between Terrence Malick and Christopher Nolan that Christopher Nolan requested to do because he's a fan of Malick. So
yeah,
it's not that, not some filmmakers don't necessarily have a great knowledge of film, but a lot of them do.
hmm
And whatever you feel about Christopher Nolan's movies, I personally don't have a crazy
yeah.
opinion either way. He does love movies. Like,
Oh
you
yeah,
can't deny that.
definitely,
So it's not
definitely.
so far out that he's seen, a lot of
Yeah,
movies, just
yeah,
because he doesn't necessarily make it super obvious like a
yeah.
Tarantino, you know what I
hmm
mean? So,
Yeah, because
yeah,
he's even like homaging like even like more like well-known movies. Because I remember I was going after Skyfall came out, I was like, I'm going to try to watch some James Bond movies. I
sure,
kind of got burned out after like maybe 3 or 5 of them because like they're all kind of similar. But there was
sure.
like one plane stunt in which I think it was one of the Timothy Dalton movies, and it was like a smaller version
From The Dark Knight
of from
Rises.
The Dark Knight
Yeah,
Rises,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, oh
Oh, yeah,
geez,
yeah,
he's clearly a James Bond fan, and he's
yeah,
trying to do his James Bond with Batman. I was like, oh
yeah.
man, and like he did it like 10 times bigger.
Yeah. And
It's
it's
on.
also, yeah, and it's like, it's James Bond. Like, who? I'm not even a James Bond guy, and I've seen most
Mhm.
James Bond movies. It's like, and I don't make movies. I'm not Christopher Nolan. It's not that far fetched that someone's like, hey, I want to,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's just like on a bigger budget. I was just thinking, oh yeah, it was the movie I just saw yesterday, Scream 6, where they're talking about like the sequels have to be bigger, and I kind of feel like that was his idea. He saw that idea as like, I want to do that, but like, let me do like an actual jumbo jet and actually have people on the sides of the plane. Like,
yeah.
that's cool.
How
But
was
yeah,
that, by the way?
Scream 6, I loved
Yeah.
it. But the thing is, right after I got a DM from my friend saying, "Oh, I'm so happy you liked the movie. I'm going to go see it tonight. I haven't seen any of them." I'm like, "Oh, geez,"
Oh, what's the
because like
point? Oh, that's weird.
I know, because it's like if you're going to
Huh.
see it, why start now? And it's one of those things where it's like I love it, but it's because I'm so deep into the series because every like line, every costume, like a poster on the wall, a name drop, the
Yeah,
music cues, it's like reference to like the first 5 movies, and like I'm getting full enjoyment out of it. But I don't know if someone who's brand new seeing it
sure.
would enjoy it. So I was just like, I hope you like it. I think there's some hand holding, but meanwhile, I'm like, I don't think there's any hand holding. It's like you got to
Sure.
know.
It's funny. I found myself, because the first, I guess Scream 3, I was a freshman in college when Scream 3 came out, but
Mhm.
I saw the first 3 Screams in the theater, And then I realized a month ago I hadn't seen 4 or 5, so I watched them. I think it was less than a month ago. I watched them both in the same day. And then I remember, again, I hadn't seen a Scream movie since, what was it, 99 or 2000 when Scream 3 came out?
I think it was like 2000, 2001 because of Columbine. They had to like delay it, the third movie.
Oh, so maybe it was my sophomore year of college. But anyway, I'm watching Scream 5, and then it's like, they bring Heather Matarazzo's character, who only shows up in 3 as Dewey's sister. And then my wife, I kind of had a reaction, and my wife was like, oh, what's that? I was like, oh, she was Jamie Kennedy's sister, but she only showed up in Scream 3 in like one scene. Like, and it's just funny because my knowledge was still there. It's like with Marvel stuff. My wife, recently we've been watching all the Marvel stuff together, but then I realized, like, the first 2 phases, she didn't watch a lot of those movies. So, which is crazy now to think. If you watch a show or a movie now and you haven't seen or even remember the first Iron Man or the first Hulk, it's like, what's the point? And then I find myself going, oh, they brought him back. And my wife was like, who's that? And then I'm like, oh, well, he was there. And I was like, damn, I still remember all this stuff. So, so it's actually nice to have my wife around on certain things because it refreshes my knowledge.
Yeah, like where where you know that from. Yeah, I totally get that. Because like there was like I went to see Solo on the Thursday night showing, and so when like the whole audience cheered when Darth Maul showed up, and the guy next to me was like, why is everyone cheering? Who is this guy?
Oh, really?
Yeah, they didn't know who Darth Maul was, and I'm like, what are you doing here on Thursday night if you don't know who Darth Maul is? Because like if anything, everyone knows Darth Maul is like a lunch pail, you know what I mean? Like he's on.
That's what I was getting ready to say. When the look, there's varied opinions about the second trilogy, but it was still Star Wars. It was still the biggest thing ever when those movies came out. I just sometimes feel like those are the kind of movies where you don't have to see it, but you still know who that person is. The double-sided lightsaber guy. You know what I mean? At least that, it's weird he didn't know that. Strange.
Yeah, that's strange to me. And it's weird how movies have changed, because I just said that was a Thursday night show. I remember there used to be, back in the day, you had to stay up to midnight on Thursday night to see a movie, and now things have changed where it's like they're releasing movies like on Wednesday or Thursday. It's just wild about the release dates and stuff.
Man, I used to do that so much. It's funny how things change. Yeah, it was like me and a group of friends who used to always do the midnight movies. I haven't done that, and so I'd probably fall asleep before the movie started now. If I did that, but that was fun. I remember. Yeah. Like I think the Dark Knight or Dark Knight Rises, like waiting in line, or like when that first wave of all the Marvel movies came out, doing the Thursday night stand in line. Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, I kind of miss doing that.
Yeah, I think the last midnight show I went to before they started doing like the 7 p.m. one was like I think it was Watchmen. It was like midnight showing, and there was only a few people there, and that really irritated me was like it was midnight showing. So you think it's gonna be super fans? No, there was like a row of drunk frat boys.
That's weird. I've never gone to a midnight movie that wasn't packed. That's strange.
Yeah, I think that was the movie wasn't that huge though. If I recall, that first box office, like they were expecting huge numbers, but it was like okay.
No, I think okay at best. I also remember just before that movie came out, Alan Moore was like on a campaign to get people to not see it, but he wasn't telling people to go see it. He was just like, I don't want anything to do with it. I'm not for it. And maybe that kind of took in comparison to other, like, at that time Marvel was out, Stan Lee was on board with all of it. Even, he's not necessarily the writer of all that stuff, but it's still Marvel, Stan Lee. He kind of gave his full support, and it was kind of the opposite with Watchmen. So.
Yeah, because that was around the time I think the MCU just started the year beforehand, 2008. And I remember that at that time, people were like, the Avengers is going to come out. I'm like, how is that going to happen? That's too many characters. But now nowadays it's like, yeah, I can picture that. Which after seeing Endgame, it's like 50 characters all in one screen, and every one character gets like 30 seconds at least.
Or not even that. Like I said, going back to Hawkeye, when, spoilers, but when Florence Pugh's character shows up, but my wife hadn't seen Black Widow, so she's like, "Who is that? Why Florence Pugh?" I mean, she knows the actress. Obviously, I'm like, "Yeah." She was in Black Widow, but I didn't like Black Widow, or what's it? She-Hulk. When Tim Roth shows up, you know what I mean? Or I was watching. I was watching Shang-Chi, and we see Ben Kingsley show up, and my wife was like, I feel like there's some significance here. Was he in another movie? It's like, yeah, he was the Mandarin, but kind of, but
Yeah.
But again, I like that because it allows me to go back and remember. Because at this point, there's so much stuff going
There is
on
so much
in the
stuff,
Marvel
yeah.
stuff. I must admit though, I couldn't finish Moon Knight. I couldn't get into it.
I
It was
didn't
just
check it out.
I just couldn't. I couldn't stay focused. I think that's the one show I didn't finish. The one Marvel show I didn't watch and finish.
Yeah, I heard
No,
that. Like they stretched out, like it felt like a movie stretch out, but I feel like almost every TV show
well,
that they're doing feels like a movie.
It's funny you
out.
say that too because that movie was in my that show was in my periphery so much. I thought it was a movie. I thought when I saw I wasn't paying attention to the wordage, and then it was like, oh, it's going to be on Disney Plus. Oh, it's a show. I thought it was a movie. Yeah, and that was the criticism that I heard a lot too, and that is what it felt. I stopped watching after episode 2 because I remember feeling, this could have just been a 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So hang on. Do I have another? What other questions do I have? I don't want to miss out on anything.
Oh, sure.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So you're in school. Like, what did you like? So did you go to college for film, or like what did you decide,
Absolutely
like,
not. I went to college for architecture.
Oh, really?
That's my professional field. I don't.
Oh, really? Okay.
Nothing. Everyone always, because I mean, in my writing, occasionally, I do specific stuff about architecture, but that's few and far between. I rarely mention it. It's almost like when someone's a chef and they don't like talking about food because that's like their job. Like that's kind of what architecture for me is like. And a lot of people assume it's like they think I'm either I do something music related or movie related, and it's like no,
because that's what I thought. Yeah,
incredibly serious hobbies of mine. So
yeah. Because like the way you like compare movies and the way you like you name drop and then you wait, like I don't know. I always give like that. This guy's got like know everything. He's got like the
I really don't. You know, I
movies.
You know, in fairness too, like I've got blind spots, man. Like westerns for one. Now you know, I mentioned them earlier. Sergio Leone, John Ford, folks like that. Sam Peckinpah, stuff like that. Because I love movies, you just kind of see everything. But when you get down to like, not even deep cuts, like the somewhat deep cuts or the minutia of that genre, I'm totally lost. There's a lot of stuff I don't know. And it's funny because my dad was big into, this is my dad's generation. He never said Westerns. It's just cowboy movies. Like that's just what my dad always, and people of his generation called him. So, but going back to school, I was not a fan of my college experience academic wise. From a social standpoint, I love college, but from a architectural standpoint, I did not like it. But we had to do a lot of presentations in school when we had a project that was, it'd be like a few weeks long or a couple of months long. We would have pinups, pinups or reviews if we were at 50%, or when we were at like 80 something percent, we would pin our work up and our teachers would just kind of rip our stuff to shreds. So that when we give our final presentation, it was on point, but they would just rip us to shreds even more. That's just what they do. But the kind of critical thinking and analysis, I definitely apply to my film writing, my movie comparisons. I definitely got that from school. So if I'm forced to give the academic side of college credit for something, it's definitely critical thinking, breaking things down. So that I definitely apply that to my love of cinema. I even had a architectural professor, Dr. Carmina Sanchez, who was big into film. And I didn't even know this until my last 2 years of school, where we used to have these laptops, and I used to watch movies on my laptop while I would make models, because it's architecture. You have to make these little abstract models of cardboard and wood and, stuff that I've never applied to my real life professionally. Yeah. And she came and she saw that I was watching Stranger Than Paradise, Jim Jarmusch's movie. And she was like, "Oh, you like this movie?" And I was like, yeah. Oh, Ghost Dog is one of my favorite movies. And I was like, really? Because at the time I didn't like it's funny saying, because Ghost Dog is one of my favorite movies ever. But at the time, when that movie first came out, I didn't get it. That's another movie full of references. And she was like, and I told her, I was like, I don't like Ghost Dog. And she was like, what? No, you need to watch it again. And the way she said it, Carmina Sanchez, she's a very just like kind of quiet, but also just a very prolific woman. And she was like, "Oh, you must watch it again." Like the way she has an accent, she's from Puerto Rico, and the way she said it sounded so sophisticated and smart. And I was like, "Oh, maybe I missed something." And then I did. I think a day later I bought Ghost Dog, and I was like, oh, there's a lot of stuff I didn't catch, and here we are, like 20 years later. Oh, whoa, way more than 20 years later.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
one of
it's
my
gotta
all-time
be, yeah.
favorite movies.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's cool. That's always great to have someone who like can change your mind or make you see things differently. Because I know there's like some people in your life that just do that. And I totally get you. Like at a point, like that's not my favorite movie, but then years later you watch it, like, oh my god, this is great. Because in high school, because I would go to the library and rent all these classic movies, because when I was younger, I'd watch like AFI movies on CBS or whatever.
I was into that in high school, that the AFI stuff, like those 100 movies you must watch. I was big into that in the late 90s. Just
because those interviews too, just to see all the directors, and they're name dropping and they're referencing and they're talking about and that's just all knowledge. And then what do you call it, the 1001 movie book? I had that as well in high school. So like I'm like renting all these movies, and in high school I was watching Casablanca, and it was like too slow for me. I couldn't get into it. I was like, I was so bored. But now it's probably one of my favorite movies of all time now.
Awesome.
I watch it and it's just like, it's great. It's perfect. And like almost like every shot is so like well thought. The shadows and all the actors, to me, it blows my mind that was thought of back then. And it's like, it's pure filmmaking. Like you watch that, it's like someone loves what they're doing here. They're taking the story, and then there's a funny thing into it, like another side by side. But when I was watching Casablanca, I noticed like in the one shot, like she has this big giant hat on. And I was like, I know why she has a big giant hat on, because there's a bad movie my mom recorded on VHS called Tentacles from 1977. And what's her name? The woman from Poseidon Adventure. She dies of a heart attack. I don't remember her name. But she's in Tentacles as a big name. I think it's like Shelley. Is it Shelley Winters?
Shelley Winters. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes. So in the movie Tentacles, I know it's a lower budget movie, and there's a scene where she's wearing a random sombrero hat. And I'm like, oh, she's wearing it because they don't have a sunshade for the shot.
Oh wow.
So they have to like film it up close. And that reminded me, because I was rewatching Casablanca afterwards after Tentacles. I was like, I think that's why Ingrid Bergman is wearing a big giant shade hat. So there's shade on the scene because they can't put like a shade there. It'll show up on the
that's really cool.
shot.
Oh, I didn't think about that. Oh, it's really cool. Yeah,
there's things like that where I'm like seeing, I was like, oh man, there's like side by side here.
It's funny, what you say that too about the AFI stuff. All the like that generation that they called the movie brats, like that generation of film. All they did was name drop filmmakers. So when someone makes a comparison or a side by side, whatever you want to call it, like it, I can't stress sometimes when people have a problem with that, or like, oh yeah, right, or it's like, oh, it's not that similar. It's kind of like sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes detractors expose themselves of just basic movie knowledge. It's kind of like a Casablanca reference. I mean, how many times has that been referenced? It's not that far-fetched that, or like any of those, 100 movies you must watch before you die, that they're probably referenced and have references themselves of other movies within that lit. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of, I was reading Tony Scott, may he rest in peace. I was just happened to cross a random interview he gave with and he was talking about how his first movie was a straight he just jacked Nicholas Roeg's first movie performance with The Hunger. And then later on in the same interview, he was just like, he was like, a lot of filmmakers don't like to admit it, but we all steal. And then actually he was like, I steal, you know what I mean? So it's like, I steal from my brother, Ridley Scott. So
yeah. So I was just thinking of that too, because me and my friend were talking about like my retrospective, and there was like ideas where I'm like, I stole that, and he was like, oh, you stole that? I was like, yeah, I stole that from something else. But because when I do my mashups, because it's like huge projects where I just like do research and all that, it's a lot of fun. So what is your process for doing a side by side when you like pick up a GIF, or like if you're watching a movie, like what's your process after you see something you recognize? So what do you do?
Man, nowadays it's just kind of like, if I'm just a filmmaker will pop into my head and I'll be like, I wonder if, and then I'll do whatever research I need to do. And then, I'll just acquire a GIF, whether it be YouTube or from my DVD collection or whatever. And then I'll just kind of see if it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. I have a whole folder of side-by-sides that just like, sometimes I just like to make them. And a lot of times when you put, it's like, oh, this doesn't work. But I still like to keep them. I don't ever delete stuff. And sometimes it'll just be random. It'll pop into my head. I have to stress, if I'm seeing a movie for the first time, even to this day, if it's a
Mhm.
new movie. Now, I can't help how my brain works. If I see something in the moment, it's like, oh, this is like a scene from so and so. It is what it is. But I
Yeah.
swear, if I'm seeing a movie for the first time, I'm still I just want to watch the movie, because I think
Mhm.
that because I've had people ask me this over the years, like, do you watch a movie just to try to get? It's like, no, I'm not paying attention to the movie
Right.
if I'm trying to get a comparison.
Mhm.
Now, there'll be some subconscious mental notes, and maybe a
Mhm.
second or third time I go back and watch the movie to kind of be like, was that scene like what I thought it was? And then, so
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I was
so
wondering, like, because like sometimes it takes me out. Like I'll see a movie and I just like I see all these connections, like, oh God, because I know that happened to me the first time I saw Batman, but the second time I enjoyed it a lot more because
sure.
sometimes my brain gets too loud with like, oh, it just reminds me of that. That's taken from
Yeah,
this looks like that.
exactly. Yeah. It
Yeah.
kind of makes it almost makes like watching a movie homework,
Yeah.
where it's like, no, I'm here. I paid all this money to sit in the no, I want to watch it and enjoy it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to answer. Sometimes I will just I think a lot of people do this. You watch a movie and then you Google something, you go to Wikipedia, and next thing you know, you're in a rabbit hole. And
Oh
that's
yeah,
kind
that
of how that
happens.
happens. And then, like, I can't
Mhm.
tell you how many times I've watched a movie and then I'll go like, oh, I wonder if this inspired that. And then I'll
Mhm.
look up something, and then
Mhm.
it'll send me in the direction of a completely different movie comparison of two other movies I wasn't even thinking about, which is what I kind of love about movies. Like, it's
Mhm.
kind of all,
Yeah.
everything is not connected, but a lot of things are connected in subconscious roundabout
Yeah.
ways or directly. You know what I mean?
Or even just like by a name or something like this person
Exactly.
produced
And
that. Yeah.
as obvious as this may sound, it's like, I don't know, man. I mean, this isn't the first moving picture, but when the Great Train Robbery came out, how many movies after it were similar to it? It's all, if you just go back to day one, it's all to some degree copying, but making it bigger.
Mhm.
Copy, make it bigger. Copy, make it slightly different. Not
Mhm.
copy that was slightly different, and you make it different. And it's just kind of,
Yeah,
that's what
it's
a
been
lot of
like
art is, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Yeah,
Even the '90s with Tarantino, all those Hitman movies came out, and then like
exactly.
Matrix, all those movies came out. Even that Christian Bale one with what is it?
Oh, Equilibrium.
Yes,
Yeah,
that one.
yeah,
Yeah, and then like they all inspire each other. And like nowadays, I think what they're trying to do is like that low budget horror. I think that's kind of coming back, or
yeah.
slightly. Yeah.
Which is what are they calling it? They're still using that term elevated horror, which I can't
Mhm.
stand. I really
No.
just don't like. But I love the pushback. I like how a lot of people don't like that term.
Yeah.
I just let's keep that going. I just find it's such
Yeah.
a, because without doing much research, a lot of times when you read reviews from people who use that term, it's kind of like, oh, you have no idea what you're talking about, or
Right.
like,
Yes.
this is the second horror movie you've ever seen,
Hmm.
or something, or it's like, you just compared it. I don't actually, or it's like, I'll read something and maybe this sounds arrogant and I'm being a little too presumptuous, but sometimes I'm like, I don't think you've seen Friday the 13th. Like, I don't think you've actually seen it.
Yeah.
But it's like, I
Right.
don't think you've actually seen A Nightmare on Elm Street. I think it goes back to what I said earlier. There's things that are so popular that you
Hmm.
don't necessarily have to see it to know the basic of it. But
Hmm.
it's one of those things, like when someone says, like, yeah, like when Jason was going around killing people at Camp Crystal Lake in the first movie, and it's like, well, no, he wasn't. Like, that's,
Hmm. Yeah.
but people say stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like or the whole Frankenstein's monster. Like when people, it's
Yeah.
that kind.
Yeah.
It's that thing. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting question because you're talking about reviews and stuff. Like, is there anyone you watch for review wise? Because I feel like the art of criticism has kind of gone down. There's like only
It
two I
has.
watch.
It has. We could do a we could do a whole episode now. Like,
Yeah.
I think the brand of film criticism now is just trying to be funny and snarky and
Yeah.
cynical, and I
Yeah.
think it really takes away. But a lot of the old school stuff, or older film writers, and to be honest, it's not like I mean, I was born in 1981, and I
Mhm.
didn't even start really reading movie reviews until maybe the late 90s. So
Mhm.
there's decades of film reviews
Mhm.
that I didn't even know about, that I go back. So like Amy Tobin um is one, a film a critic that I'm very critical of, but
Mhm.
he's still a brilliant guy, is like Armin White.
Mhm.
Um
Well, that's right. I remember him. Like he used to go real viral back in the early 2010. I
Yeah,
remember.
it's funny. I don't like to associate him with this new era of like snarky stand-up comedian letterbox critics, but because he's not, but he does say a lot of hurtful stuff
Mhm.
sometimes, where it's like, you're an adult, like you're a grown man. There was no
Mhm.
need for you to say, like, you could just say, I didn't like this movie, here's why, instead of like, insulting someone's like family member just because you didn't like the movie. But
Mhm.
that was kind of the start of that, and he started to get attention from that. And I think in a small way, there are a lot of critics that did stuff like that, and it's like because criticism was kind of dying to some degree, like the traditional sense. And I think some of the older guys, with no offense, maybe slightly less integrity, started doing the shock pull quotes, and that kind of got them a little bit more notoriety. Whereas other lesser known critics today didn't want to go that route, and I guess you could say they had integrity and didn't want to do the mean stuff.
Yeah.
So, but other critic, I like to read old Jonathan Rosenbaum reviews. My own friends, man, like the guys at the Pink Smoke, or my buddy Martin Kessler, like those guys really have a great mind for film and know how to, So like I said, it ranges from known kind of like legendary folks like Armin White or Amy Tobin and Jonathan Rosenbaum to people who I'm, friends with. So at this point, as long as there's a genuine thought and not like this movie sucks so bad and blah 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 blah. Like I'm not interested in that. But if you think the movie was bad, but you got a lot of positive or not positive, but you have some kind of constructive things to say about it, I'll still read it. I read a lot of reviews, but a few sentences in, sometimes I can just sense like, oh, I know where this is going, and I just stop reading.
And there's just sometimes where I feel like people put their own emphasis of what they wanted from the movie because it wasn't what they wanted, and it's like
that's been a big.
You got to separate that.
More than ever, I think that's been a big problem. It's this whole thing. Well, I didn't see myself in this movie, therefore I didn't like it. I think that's very dangerous. I don't know, man. I'm a big black guy. I had a kidney transplant. I'm left-handed. I grew up blah blah blah. But it's like I don't think I've ever seen myself in a movie.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. But
that
I still love them.
Yeah, because everyone's
that's
like
my thing. It's like I think it's crazy to just dismiss a movie because your specific demographic wasn't shown or represented enough. It drives me crazy.
Because that blows me away. Because I was a kid who grew up with movies. I'm Native American. There ain't no movie about me. It's like I'm in a very small percentage. Like Marvel's finally doing a TV show where they drop it in the Haudenosaunee territory. I'm like, oh, finally something about me. But when I was growing up, it's like I liked Han Solo. Like I wore the vest. I didn't see the difference between me and Han Solo.
That was my thing too. Like as a kid, I sure. I mean, if you're someone of color, you see someone that kind of looks like you, like as a kid. But I don't know, man. If you're like 30 or older and you're still like, I want to see myself in the Star Wars movie. It's kind of like, I don't know, man. Grow up. Like seriously, grow up and just enjoy grow up.
Yes, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it really bugs me. But and I also and my pushback too is like take I'll just strictly at like black representation, like especially when you take it to Twitter, which Twitter is kind of the reason we're having this conversation right now. People, there's certain people who get criticized for not having enough black characters in their movies. Like it could be Greta Gerwig or Sofia Coppola or I don't know, Noah Baumbach, Wes Anderson. But then sometimes I'll jump into a thread and then I'll just say like, do you want Greta Gerwig making a movie about like a black fan? Like, do you want that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, because if she did it, the same people complaining would probably be like, she doesn't know black people. And it's like, well, yeah, that's why she's not making a movie about them. Same thing with Sofia Coppola. Even though, in fairness, I liked her last movie a lot, On the Rocks, which is, Marlon Wayans is in it. Rashida Jones, she's half black. So, and it was more genuine. There's still my only thing I can't, and this is personal, what I can't get over with On the Rocks was part of it feels like why she casted like Marlon Wayans and Rashida Jones was because perhaps she heard some of the backlash. Was like, all right, I'll cast a black character. But whatever the case may be, she ended up making a really good movie.
That's good. Yeah.
I think that movie specifically and the I don't know if you can even say his name anymore. He's kind of Mr. Bill Murray, but the character that he plays in the movie, it's like, who knows that type of person better than the daughter of Francis Ford Coppola and the daughter of Quincy Jones, Rashida Jones? You know what I mean? Like those two women know those men. I think that's why I'm not a big Sofia Coppola fan, but my favorite movies of hers are things like Somewhere, On the Rocks, which are movies about men. When she makes movies about men, that's when she hits a home run. every single time, because these are all characters that are just a representation of her, like, observing her father
Right.
over the decades. And I think she
Right.
observed her father quite well when she makes those certain specific
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
So
There's always like that if you know something and you try to do it, and like usually that's your strongest point, and that's what I
yeah,
think about a lot of filmmakers and all that.
yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. I think one more question before we head out, because I think we're around the hour mark, so that should be
Oh,
good.
take your time. It's all no,
Oh,
we're
we're good.
it's all good.
We're good. We're good. Okay, we're
Yeah,
good.
yeah, you're good.
Okay, okay. So about directors nowadays, because I was talking about on my other streams, and I was thinking about like what director has like a good standout without without a Christopher Nolan, not a Ridley Scott, but like someone who's like current now, who has like a name, other than like Jordan, like other than the big names, like who else is there? Because there's like the Jordan Peels, and then there's like M. Night, and then who's the Ari Aster, like
All right.
who else? Who else has like the noticeable voice out there that you would recommend?
Yeah. Huh. That's that's tough. Yeah, like newer film, like
Yeah,
newer-ish, I guess,
yeah,
is what you're
yeah.
saying.
Because I'm wondering like who's going to be like the next Tony Scott, because there really hasn't been anyone to fill that void, at least for
There's a
me.
lot of like a Tony Scott guys like that. No one that I can think of.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was gonna say I'm not even a huge fan of his, but the first name that came to mind, like, I actually like Robert Eggers.
Mm-hmm.
He's
Oh
not my
yeah,
he's
yeah.
not like my favorite filmmaker, but of the newish in the last
Mm-hmm.
decade, I
Mm-hmm.
guess he's someone who, like,
Yes.
anytime he releases a movie, I don't put too much stock into anything he makes, but I end up
Yes.
coming like, oh, it's good. Like,
Yeah.
even The Northman, I found myself defending The Northman more than I thought I was going. Just for the simple fact that, like, Stellan Skarsgård, when you look like him, why did it take this long for him to be a Viking? You know what I mean? Like he's whether it's what's the HBO show where he's like the abusive husband, or Pretty Little Lie, or Big Little Lie, something, whatever. I just think for the most part he has not been cast properly, or even when he was like True Blood, when he was the Viking vampire. I just think that show's a little too corny. I think The Northman is fun. It's like, finally we're using this like giant like guy in like a physical like role. You know what I mean?
Because he's just like walking like this the whole time.
I also enjoyed him in Jesus, I'm already drawing a blank. What was David Cronenberg's son's? Infinity Pool.
Infinity Pool, yes.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I think that's my answer.
That guy,
as far as Brandon Cronenberg.
Yes. Okay. Because he's
Antiviral is a movie I don't think I necessarily need to watch ever again. It's fine, but Possessor is so much fun. Like Possessor, it's such a fun movie. And same thing with with Infinity Pool. And also on the subject of if I could bring up this whole nepotism stuff to some degree, it's kind of like Brandon Cronenberg doesn't necessarily hide from the fact that, like, hey, David Cronenberg's my dad. He also grew up in the business. Like, if you look at, like, he worked on Existence and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, what else are you gonna do? And David Cronenberg is so prolific that, of course, to some degree, you're gonna follow the family name. I just think sometimes when people call out the nepotism stuff,
I don't get that, because like,
I mean, I get, look, there's clear cases of like, hey, this person is not talented and they got where they are because of who they're related to. But at the same time, take movie out of it. It's like, I don't know. There's like a guy that started a construction company in the 1940s, and his son and his grandson ended up getting the jobs, or his nephew. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like people just focus all this just on movies, where it's kind of like it's everywhere in the world. It's just about who's good or not. You know what I'm saying? So,
and the thing is, like, to me, it's like, if the people who are complaining about that probably don't know movies, because there's been nepotism since the beginning.
Dave, seriously, and stuff like, it's funny. People don't even. Because, see, this also goes off into another conversation where it's someone like, I guess, like your dad or uncle or whoever could kind of get you in the door, but like I'll just throw out a random like Samara Weaving, like, her uncle is Hugo Weaving, but it's like, look, I get it, Hugo Weaving is Lord of the Rings and The Matrix, but it's like, does he have that much pull to be like from a dark room, like, hey, cast my niece in this movie? It's kind of like, I don't, sometimes it's a bit much. It's funny that to this day there's people who don't even know that, like, Jason Schwartzman is in the Coppola family also. And he's another one that even when people do know, he doesn't catch that much heat. Or like Jeff Bridges doesn't get a lot of hate. but then like they'll focus it on Sofia Coppola, or they'll focus it on so and so. Like there's this weird selective outrage when it comes to nepotism.
Yeah.
So
because they don't know, because like Kurt Russell, I think his whole family, like his father, and his
absolutely,
grandfather, like all that, and
he
then
was a
even,
child actor. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So yeah,
and Jamie Lee Curtis, like her mom was in
she's
Psycho, and
another
that's
one.
become
No
Halloween.
one says a thing about
Thing
Jamie
about
Lee
her.
Curtis.
No,
Not that
nothing.
they should, because she's like, that's the thing too. It's one of those things where not all the time. Sometimes people just coast through life because of who they're related to. I cannot deny that. But sometimes some people just, you can't help who your mother and your father are, and you're given this platform. And if you perform well, then you perform well. I'm not trying to defend these like super rich people. If anything, I just don't like blaring inconsistencies. So
to me, it's like trying to make a mountain out of an anthill. It's like, yeah,
kind
it's
of,
fine.
yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
It really is. It's just people who don't know movies. It's like, come on now. It's happened all these years. That's just I don't understand, or they don't have like the specific knowledge. It's like, come on, what are you doing?
Yeah,
What are you doing? Okay, so I have a huge DVD collection, and I'm too afraid to count. How big is your DVD collection or Blu-ray collection? Have you counted?
It's not no long. It's so hard to. I've given up because I haven't bought a DVD since 2014.
Oh wow! Good on you. Good on you.
The last DVD I bought too, and that year I only bought that one DVD that year. It was Jodorowsky's Dune.
Yeah.
No, it's pretty big, but I also don't break because I have a big VHS collection. But everything is so broken up because at one time when I had everything in one place, I had hundreds of VHSs, thousands of DVDs, but between moving and stuff and giving a bunch away, like you get to a certain age where, no offense, but it's like, why do I own Anchorman on DVD, or like, why do I own Sideways? Although I know why, because for a period of time before I got into my field of architecture and design, immediately graduating for a year, I worked at a video store, and the discount that we got was really good. Also, when it came, this was in that 2004 period, so VHSs were still like, if you worked at a video store, you would know, like when they would send the new releases, you would get like one VHS copy. And my video store had a rule that if a movie hadn't been rented in over a year, you could buy it for like 99 cents. It was some crazy deal.
Wow.
But I worked at this video store chain. It doesn't even exist anymore, called Tommy K's. It's in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And every store has a database of every store. So, when you work, let's see, Monday nights are busy. Tuesday nights, that's when the new releases come out on the weekends. But like a Wednesday or a Thursday night is just dead. And you're working till like midnight. And then so you could just search the databases of other stores in the chain. So I used to have a list. And I would just, on my days off, I would just drive to one store in Connecticut, another store in Connecticut, like, hey, I work at this branch. I see that you haven't rented out this movie in over a year. Can I buy it? And that's how I acquired a big.
Wow, yeah.
I remember Craigslist. People would just get rid of their movie. This was in like 2005. People would just get rid of their movies. I would just take trains or cabs and just collect people's entire collection. And then I would just move. It just got too much. I gave a bunch of DVDs to my uncle. My VHSs are still in the basement of my grandmother's house. I was just there maybe a few months ago, and I saw it. It's the most random movie I have. Roadside Prophets.
Oh my gosh.
Have you ever seen that?
No.
It's a really good movie. It's with.
I'm just amazed that you have like that on like VHS there. I was like, oh man.
It was just like right there on display at the top when I opened one of the big boxes. It's a riff on Easy Rider, and it stars John Doe from X. For those that John Doe was the scumbag bartender from Roadhouse who got fired for stealing the money, but he's also a musician. And it stars John Doe and Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys, and they take a cross-country motorcycle trip to bury the ashes of their friend. But it's got these David Carradine has a cameo, John Cusack has a cameo. I think it's Don Cheadle's first film role.
Oh, okay, so that's early. Okay. And what was it called again?
Roadside Prophets.
It's
a really fun movie. It's one of those, like, I can't sleep. It's like 10:30 at night. Just throw this movie on, but you're not gonna fall asleep. You're gonna watch it. It's a good 90-minute. It was directed by this woman Abby Wool, who if you look up her IMDb, she's like the cast and crew on a lot of movies. She's kind of synonymous with Alex Cox. She was part of the crew, like, you know, like a boom mic or a key grip operator. So like she worked on Repo Man and Sid and Nancy and all kinds of stuff. This is like the one movie that she directed.
Yeah.
But you'll see a lot of familiar faces from like Repo Man and all that stuff.
Oh,
so
I gotta check it out. I just wrote it down. There's like 2 movies.
It's such a fun movie. It really, yeah. There was a brief period in the late 80s, early 90s where Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys was acting. Have you ever seen a movie called Lost Angels?
No, I haven't heard of that.
It's like a juvenile delinquent movie. It came out in '89 where he's like this troubled youth.
Yeah.
Donald Sutherland is like the like a guidance counselor, and Ad Rock is this like misguided troubled youth. Yeah, he had a couple of movies that came out. He wanted to be an actor for a short period of time. So
yeah,
I can't recommend Roadside Prophets enough. It's a lot of it is nostalgia, but it's such a fun like late night Los Angeles West Coast movie. It's really cool. It's really fun.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been writing down some movies that you mentioned. I was like, oh, wait, I gotta.
Oh, cool.
I gotta look that down.
Please, if Roadside Prophets, I would put that at the top. It's a fun movie.
Okay, put that as number 1 to look up.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of movies I have to rewatch for my show, so I'm falling behind.
Sure.
I'm falling behind because like my friend, for years we've been wanting to watch talk about the Planet of the Apes, the original series.
Mm-hmm.
So now I have a show. I was like, we got to talk about it. And then afterwards, I was like, oh geez, now I got to watch all 5 again because it's been a long time since I watched them because I love those movies. I like them more than the new ones because I feel like the new one is sort of just like a, no offense, but it just feels like it's the same story but told 3 different ways. I don't know.
Sure,
it's my opinion.
Sure.
But like the old ones, it's like random. Like the first one's the best. The second one's like underground sci-fi. Third one is like fish out of water, and then it's like kind of like conspiracy because they're trying to kill the child. And then the conquest is like my favorite one, and that's like the, what do you call it? The humans and apes are fighting, and then there's the battle, which is the cheap one, but I want to give it another shot because I remember.
Yeah, see, I only know the first 3, and only the first one I know quite a bit, and yeah. What's the one? I don't know why. Since I was a kid, this image always. I think it's from the second or the third one, where the apes are now imprisoned, and one of the apes gets like another monkey kind of grabs them from behind a jail cell and starts strangling them from. I don't remember which one, but that image always kind of stuck in my head.
That's the third one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because because they came back in time and they're trying to act like apes, and the one who gets choked out, the ape that chokes him, is a regular modern day ape.
Yeah. That's it's so weird that image is always stuck in my head as a kid. Yeah, it's another movie that my dad was watching, and I just came, hey, what are you watching? I just sat and started watching the movie with him.
Yeah. I have a question. So what was like the first movie that made you go like, oh my God, that changed me? Because like I think my first one that, oh my God, that changed me was like movies can do that, because like I was a kid, and it was what do you call it? I believe it was Child's Play 2, because it was I happened to open the door at the violent part when Chucky had his hand and he put in the blade, and he's like, ah. So what was like the big moment like you saw in the movie, like, oh my God, that's a little intense?
This sounds, oh man, it's gonna sound so messed up.
Okay.
But I wasn't supposed to be watching. It was we had a TV downstairs, and when I couldn't sleep, I would just kind of like sneak downstairs and just turn it on when I was like a little kid, and we had cable on both the TVs, and I watched The Accused when I was like a little kid, and that scene in the bar, and I was just and what messed me up is one of the guys that attacks Jodie Foster is the actor that plays Troy in The Goonies.
Oh geez, yeah.
So like when I was a kid and I used to watch like kid-centric movies, and I would watch movies with my dad that were like more adult movies, a lot of times the actors didn't really cross over. So I just remember feeling dirty, like, oh, this dirtiness kind of crossed over into the Goonies. Like it crossed over into my movie, and I couldn't watch Goonies for a long time because anytime I saw Troy, I'm like, oh, you assaulted Jodie Foster, like, you know, and that was the first. And like, remember I went to school the next day. I felt like I was like quiet because it's like, again, you know, like that. And I'm talking about that specific scene that everybody knows. And it's like, you know, I was like maybe 8 or 9. Like, you know what I'm saying? So this is not bad parenting. They were asleep. I should have been in bed. I snuck downstairs to watch it. So that was like the first, like, whoa, what the hell? And then, but honestly, when I was a kid, I didn't think about, oh, this could change me until like high school. I remember I saw Lost Highway. Then we came out when I was in high school. And at that young age too, I remember being, because like O.J. Simpson was happening at the same time. Yeah. And then I remember thinking to myself, like, this is weird. Was this influenced by OJ because it seems like, it's like
Mm-hmm.
this guy in LA, he killed his wife out of a jealous rage, and that's essentially what the OJ Simpson case was.
Mm-hmm.
And then, years later, it's so crazy that Robert Blake, who
Yes.
clearly did what he did, but he got off,
Yeah.
was in that movie Lost Highway. So that movie
Mm-hmm.
it's a connection to like both the OJ case and the Robert Blake. Well, it's not the Robert Blake case. It's actually the
Yeah.
murder of his wife. But
Mm-hmm.
so I guess Lost Highway was the first where it was just like, oh,
Yeah.
this seems very like today. Because,
Mm-hmm.
it did I mean, I obviously didn't see it in 95, but it came out in 96.
Mm-hmm.
And OJ was from 95 through, I don't know, man, 97, 98.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like, so it was so. And then I remember reading, oh man, I don't remember where, but David Lynch, who was very evasive when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, what's this movie about? Or, hey,
Mm-hmm.
was this scene influenced by that? He's just like, in so many words,
Yeah.
David Lynch is like, no, I don't know. But
Yeah.
he was very specific in that, like, hey, I was living in LA at the time and OJ was everywhere. And looking back on it, OJ definitely probably influenced the vibe of that movie. And like
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the handful of times where David Lynch was just like not trying to
Yeah.
be evasive. It was just like, yeah, no, I think OJ definitely
Yeah.
was subconsciously injected into this movie. So I guess that's
Yeah.
probably my answer.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting because it kind of reminds me of another thing where like either movies around that time are sort of influenced or like they come out right before something happens.
No,
And that's a
exactly.
good
Here,
that
let me just turn on the light. I realize it's getting
uh,
dark here. Hold on. Sorry
yep,
about that.
yep, yep.
Yes. Ooh, sorry.
Yep. We'll go to the comments here. Hello, Millie. Shane Ford's here. I'm not sure if Luke's still here. Hello, Luke. Hello, Luke. And then
Much better.
Oh yeah, much better.
All right. Sorry about that. Sorry.
It's okay.
But you were saying?
Oh yeah, so there's like movies that come out at a similar time or before that, because there's a movie I really liked that came out in like '93, like a year before OJ did his thing, and it was The Chase, where it's a chase through Los Angeles, and it's similar to the event, and it's like there's movies like that where they come out and they're either before or after, and they kind of affect the cinema landscape. And did you have any other examples that you remember while growing up?
Oh,
Like,
1,000%. Look, I know there was the first World Trade bombing in '93, but the September 11th, Hal Hartley, who's one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, he made 2 films before September 11th that dealt with like a crazy terrorist attack or apocalyptic attack on New York City. And it's kind of like, whoa, that's pretty crazy. He made this movie called The Book of Life in the very late 90s. And the final shot is Martin Donovan as Jesus Christ looking over at the Twin Towers, deciding if he wants to kind of rain down an apocalypse on Earth. And that's how the movie ends. And then he did this other movie called No Such Thing with Sarah Polley, where a big part of that movie is about a plane hijacking at JFK. So it's kind of like, whoa, September 11th hadn't even happened yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's another example. It's like, wow.
Yeah, because there's just things like that.
Hal Hartley's, if you watch his movie Henry Fool from '97, he starts talking about, and so I imagine the movie was probably written prior to that, so like maybe in '96. But there's a big section in that movie that talks about what essentially become Kindles or like a Kindle Fire. But but this is in the '90s. He's talking about publishing, and they're like, people aren't going to be reading paperback books. They're going to be on these devices where you read them on a screen. And it's like, whoa, he was right.
Yeah.
A little more than a decade later, he was absolutely right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh man, that reminds me too. Like he's talking about like technology and stuff. It's like I like Die Hard 4. I know not everyone else does, but I sort of like it. But like that movie is like the last movie before everything changed to like iPhones. Because in that movie they're still using like flip phones, and they're even though like the topic is still relevant now, where like technology and stuff. But like they're using flip phones, but now everything's like on a tablet or a phone or yeah, it's totally different. But there's something like that where it's like right before, and then it's kind of dated, even though it's like, man, if it was made like a year later, it probably would have taken off or whatever, or lasted longer. And that always kind of bums me out about that one, even though it kind of played safe.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was
Oh,
thinking
no,
when
what?
you were talking about how like The Matrix came out and inspired all these movies, I always felt bad for a movie like Existence because it came
Mhm,
out around the same time as The Matrix. It's the
mhm,
same, like the whole idea of like plugging in a jack into your body and going into
mhm,
this kind of like alternative realm, and then it's kind of like, are we
mhm,
still in it or not? I think Existence initially got eaten up by all the Matrix hype,
mm,
in
yep,
in '99. So it's nice that Cronenberg fans kept that movie going, and now it got like a second life. But
that's
it
good,
just
yeah.
I meant to say that earlier.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So speaking of Second Life, what movies did you grow up with that you wanted to have like a second life, and now that they're finally happening, like they're coming back?
Clifford, Clifford's kind of the first example of that. Ghost Dog isn't. We talked about this. Ghost Dog's another one. Ghost Dog
Mhm,
first came out. I don't think a lot of people got it, but just
mhm,
it being associated with that Jim Jarmusch prestige vibe, and now it's on Criterion, and I think people kind of get it now. So that's another. I'm trying my best to get Freaked,
mhm,
a second. Alex Winter's Freaked. I love that movie so
mhm,
much. Young Einstein is another movie I wish could get a second life. Yahoo Serious is such an interesting guy. He just kind of
mhm,
that first movie, Young Einstein. He was like this big success. I remember when I was a kid, they tried pitting him against Paul Hogan. They tried to make this like Australian crossover beef between the two big Australian actors and
yeah.
whatnot. But yeah, yeah. So those are the ones that come to mind. Meet the Applegates is another one I'd like to get a
Mhm,
second life. I feel like Parents, which is another personal favorite movie of mine.
mhm,
Scrolling Twitter, I see a lot of love for Bob Balaban's Parents. For those who aren't aware, so I guess to some degree it got its second life. Shout out to Bob Balaban. A lot of people don't realize he's a director of some interesting stuff outside of Parents and My Boyfriend's Back. He directed episodes of Strangers with Candy.
mhm,
Also, I think Bob Balaban. I think a lot of people just associate him with like the Christopher Guest movies, or he's always like the bookish guy in
mhm,
every movie. But he's a very interesting filmmaker. He's a very interesting director. So
mhm.
I guess yeah. So those are my list of movies I wish would get us. Oh, I see someone
Yeah,
just chimed in with
parents,
a miscount. Yeah,
parents.
that movie's so
Yes.
good. Yeah, it really taps into that psyche of like it's that perfect age when you're like 7.
Mhm,
And also I relate to that movie we were talking earlier about representation and stuff. If this sounds so weird, if there's one movie that's kind of the perfect only child movie because I don't have any siblings.
mhm,
Um, so when it's just you and your parents, there's a lot of like, I spent a lot of time, my childhood friends are still my best friends to this day. But at the end of the day, you got to go home at some point. So I just remember it
mhm,
was always just me and these two weird adults. You know what I mean? That I would just I didn't have a sibling bothering me, or I didn't have an older sibling that I
mhm,
would bother. So it was just me kind of observing these adults. And that's a lot of
mhm.
what Parents is about. Like the lead actor, the lead kid, that's the only thing he ever acted in. That's a big part of that movie. He's just staring at these two weirdos. You know what I mean? And like you get
Yeah,
that age when you're like, you look at your parents, like, who are these people? They're like,
yeah.
they're weird. I don't like them some days. I love them other days. They take care
Mhm,
of me. They're just weird. You know what I mean?
mhm,
And that's it's not so much about the horror element of that movie. It's more just the observation. And it's such a quintessential kind of like only child movie. So I feel like if you're an only child and parents, it might hit you a little harder, and maybe you didn't realize it because it's such a like only child film. So yeah.
mhm, mhm. And let's see. I'm not sure I got all my questions.
Yeah, man, cool. And hey, look, I'm glad to come back
Oh,
any
yeah,
any,
yeah.
any other time, man.
Yep.
It's really yeah, no, I enjoy.
Mhm. So I think this will be our last one because
Okay,
we call it. Yeah, because we call
I
it.
can
It's
also
getting
hear
a
my
little
son
bit.
screaming
Yeah, I can hear him screaming, so I'm like,
outside.
I better wrap it up. So my favorite, my last one would be, what's your favorite theatrical experience? Like, do you have a moment either from your childhood, high school, or adulthood where you went to a
Oh, I
movie
have more
and it
than
was
one.
more than one, or okay, yeah, it's
Yeah.
give me the one that first pops to your mind then. Yep,
I'm gonna have to go with two. So the first one, I
two, that's
went
fine.
to go see Rocky 4 with my dad. I
Oh
was really
wow.
young when that came out, and this
Mhm,
was before this. We still lived in Queens, so we went to. It was a urban theater,
mhm,
but it was so lively.
mhm,
Like it just felt like everyone was just talking, and it was just
mhm,
noise. But I didn't mind it because it was Rocky 4. It was such a fun kind of like when Apollo died, no one expected him to die, and I remember like everyone's react like whoa, he died, like people were yelling at the screen. So that's that in terms of big theater experience. And another example, there's this Thai movie by Apichatpong Weerasethakul, where people call him Joe for some reason. I think it's a play out because his name is so difficult to pronounce, but he did this movie called Uncle Boon Me, who can recall their past lives. It's one of my favorite movies. It's a very just like it was in a quiet kind of art house theater, and it was very sensory. A lot of the movie takes place in the forest, so it's just like constant chirping and raindrops and leaves and stuff. And I went in that movie blind. I had no idea that movie was about a guy who had kidney disease, which is something that I went through or still kind of going through. I had a transplant. So that surprise of, oh, that's what this movie's about. But then there's these like monkey people that show up with red eyes. Like the movie kind of goes in so many different directions that I had no idea what I was getting into. So I'll just, so seeing Rocky 4 and Uncle Boon Me, which couldn't be any different, but those are good picks.
Sure. So I'll let that wrap up. So tell people where they can reach you on your socials.
Great. Well, I want people to go to my site. So it's just, www.pinnlandempire.com, or you can go to Zebras in America, which is the podcast that I co-host with one of my good friends, Scott Thorough. We're everywhere. We're on Google Play, iTunes, SoundCloud. Like I mentioned earlier too, my second home where I write a lot is the Pink Smoke. But you want to find me on social, it's just at Pinnland_Empire on Twitter, or my alternate account where I just post a lot of action side by sides. It's at Hokuto Empire. Oh, at Hokuto_Empire. Sorry. Yes. That's where you can find all my stuff. But PinnlandEmpire.com is the database where you can find everything. So.
Oh, we got a fan here. Shane Ford really loves Zebras.
Awesome. Oh, I appreciate that. Great.
Yes.
Awesome. We're trying to record more regularly. We took a little break, but we're semi back. So
that's cool. That's awesome. Cool. All righty. So thank you guys for tuning in. And next week, I believe it's me and Sarah. We're going to talk about my favorite movie, Halloween, and we're going to talk about her favorite movie, Bridesmaids. So that should be a nice, two different movies.
Awesome. So, and man, if you ever want to, I see you got the toys behind you. As an only child, I was big into action figures, whether it was Cops or Micro Machines or Battle Beasts. I remember all that stuff. Yeah. Thundercats. I remember the evolution of the wrestler, the big rubber wrestler guys to the the smaller ones who had the moves or their arms went like this, all that stuff. So man, I'd love to come back anytime you want to have me.
Yep, I got some wrestlers too. I got the original Hasbro's here.
Oh, you got Jake the Snake right there. Okay, the Hasbro. Those that was the second generation of wrestler.
I forgot the rubber guys were called. They're like on the tip of my tongue. I know, but I know those figures as well.
I don't think it was Tonka. But I just remember those guys. This is how
LJNs. That's what they were. LJNs.
This is how deep I remember. I always hated action figures where the joints couldn't move, because it's like it just takes the fun out of positioning them and punching. Like if you guy just does that, I couldn't get into it. So I know they're collector's items though.
Oh yeah, definitely. Nowadays, those Hasbro's are ridiculous expensive, even though they're just kind of stiff and only have 4.
I remember I got the ring for one Christmas. I got the ring. I got all I wanted was wrestler guys. I remember I got Big Boss Man, Tugboat, Ultimate Warrior. I got that Jake, because that Jake the Snake came with the little rubber snake.
Yeah, the rubber snake. Yep.
Yep. Ultimate Warrior. I wasn't really I was never really into Hulk Hogan ever, but But anyway, we're about to turn it to another podcast. But anyway,
that's another episode. We could totally do retro toys or top 5 favorite toys or whatever.
Anytime.
Yes, anytime. Awesome. That's awesome. So I could have you on for something else. That's great. Okay. Of course. So thank you guys for tuning in. This has been really fun. Thank you, Mark. This is really awesome. Marcus, I should say. Yes.
Cool.
Yep. So thank you guys. See you next week.
All right.
And broadcast.